We're joined now, I'm very happy to say, by Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent this morning. Mr. Secretary, it's a pleasure to have you on. It's been a while. It's good to see you.
Good morning, Joe.
Market is trading higher today, and we did see what was welcomed yesterday, and that is a bounce from some of the lows and even a higher close on the NASDAQ. One of our guests, Mr. Secretary, earlier mentioned the resumption of the trade put. And not coincidentally, it coincided with your trip to Florida over the weekend, where reportedly you were stressing that the market needed to hear that negotiations about these tariffs were in play. Lo and behold, we did see a bounce. Is that a fair assessment? Do you think that's what happened?
Well, it's not a fair assessment of what happened over the weekend. I went down to see President Trump, as I do many weekends, and I can tell you it's all President Trump's decision, and he had a view on after Liberation Day that we should go into quiet mode and let our partners think about the kind of the shock and awe that he presented, and over those following few days from April 2nd, we had I think we're up to 70 countries contact the White House for how to come and negotiate. So, I would say that the negotiations are the result of the massive inflow of inbound calls to come and negotiate. Had nothing to do with the market.
I think the market took some solace, though, in kind of a change in the perspective. Just last week, we were hearing no negotiations. Now we're talking about, you mentioned 70 different countries. We're approaching Japan, I guess, was early in terms of placing a call to the White House. And now, in earnest, you and the U.S. Trade Representative are going to begin negotiations with Japan. I think that some of the stability in the markets, there's no doubt that's what I think helped massage the markets to some extent.
Well, look, Joe, my my advice on April 2nd to our trading partners was not to panic, don't escalate, and then we will see where President Trump is after a period of days or weeks. The response was overwhelming, so it was after a period of days, and he decided that it would be a good time to begin negotiating. The Japanese were very good actors. The president had a very good call yesterday with the Japanese Prime Minister that led to these negotiations. And look, the Japanese are military partners, they're economic partners. We have a substantial imbalance with them, and I'm sure that they are as anxious as we are to get this remedied.
Mr. Secretary, we spoke yesterday with Peter Navarro, and he described his view on these things as it's not enough to get to zero tariffs. You have to take down all the non-tariff barriers that exist as well. His proposal, as he's written about today, is to get rid of the VAT, the value-added tax on top of a lot of other things, that is what it would take for us to reach any sort of a settlement with Europe. Are you in the same frame of mind as Peter Navarro is when it comes to that?
Becky, I think everything's on the table. So they're tariffs. The academic literature shows that it's actually the non-tariff barriers, which are both harder to quantify and harder to, they're more insidious because they're hidden, they're obfuscated. So tariffs, non-tariff barriers, currency manipulation, and then subsidies to both labor and industry. So everything's on the table, Becky.
Meaning that it would take all of those things for us to reach any agreement that would make any sense? I mean, the value-added tax isn't directed at us. It's a tax that every manufacturer, including those that are based in Europe, pay as well. It's more the equivalent of a sales tax like we impose here.
Well, again, I think there's going to be a lot of back and forth. President Trump is going to be personally involved in the negotiations, and we will see what our trading partners offer. For instance, there is talk of a big energy deal in Alaska where the Japanese and perhaps the Koreans, perhaps the Taiwanese would provide would take a lot of the offtake and provide financing for the deal. So, that could be an alternative for them to come forward with that, because not only would that provide a lot of American jobs, but it would narrow the trade deficit. So, right. Becky, everything's on the table.
Mr. Secretary, though, help us just understand this, and maybe it's a very nuanced answer because there's sort of a different component parts to this. So the president said yesterday with Netanyahu, quote, that these tariffs can be permanent tariffs and there can also be negotiations. We also had Peter Navarro, as Becky mentioned, and you just talked about, saying that the whole goal of this is to bring manufacturing back to the U.S., and then there's been the discussion of trying to raise revenue as a function of the tariffs. All of those different ideas, to some degree, oddly enough, are at odds with each other, meaning if you're successful at creating revenue from the tariffs, you're not bringing jobs back to America necessarily, though that could be an offshoot of what happens. I'm trying to understand from your perspective whether these really are negotiations, they're not negotiations, what success at the end of the day actually looks like.
Well, Andrew, that lot to unpack there, and let's just go through it piece by piece. That if we put up a tariff wall, the ultimate goal would be to bring jobs back to the U.S., but in the meantime, we will be collecting substantial tariffs. As I've said, I believe on this show that if we're successful, tariffs would be a melting ice cube in a way, because you're taking in the revenues as the manufacturing facilities are built in the U.S., and there should be some level of symmetry between the taxes we begin taking in with the new industry from the payroll taxes as the tariffs decline.